they're inflaming our sort of sexual lust. And so we're made in the image of God. We have divine energies as long as we participate with God. We can lose that image of God when we sin. But by inflaming the sexual passions, they're using our creative energies to basically move society and create things that move us towards this sort of ultimate demonic will.
Disney Donald Duck, I don't know if you've ever seen this cartoon. It's called Education for Death. So it was a part of Disney's propaganda campaign in the World War II era. I wanted people to recognize pop culture for what it was, which is like a ritual working.
O Lord of hosts, be with us, for we have none other help in times of adversity but Thee. O Lord of hosts, have mercy on us.
All right. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is David Patrick Carey with Church of the Eternal Logos, and I have a very special guest this evening, the wonderful and very talented Jamie Hanshaw. How are you?
I'm very good. How are you?
I'm doing great. You know, it's been really wonderful being able to form a bit. I may go out on a limb here, but a friendship with you and Jay. You know, the last few couple months, really. His couple events. We were just at a wedding there in Franklin, and so you know, it's been great forming a relationship and being friends with you guys and hanging out. And when we were in Orlando, I was finally able to see your full presentation that you do at Jay's in-person events. And it was really, really good. And so I told you, like, right after, I was like, Jamie, hey, will you come on? You think maybe we can do, I don't want to give you, I don't want you to give everything away because some of the stuff you guys want to keep under wraps, but could you come in and talk about it? And so that's what we're going to get into tonight, is really dealing with some of your research in your book, Hollywood Mind Control, but looking at what I thought was so interesting is the Babylonian and the sort of ancient pagan roots to all this stuff. So before we get into your research and your work, I know the vast majority of the people here already know who you are, but maybe you can introduce yourself, your background, spiritual background maybe, and then how you got interested in conspiracy theories, and maybe how that eventually led to Christ and who you are today.
Okay. My background is I was raised in a Baptist church. I went to private school until I was homeschooled. So we were very on the cutting edge of different ways of dealing with issues. My parents, or my mom especially, was always very well educated and read, and she was a sort of social justice warrior before that became an ambiguous kind of term. But I remember her being very anti-abortion in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
She would go and like picket Planned Parenthoods and things like that. She would write letters to the editor about curriculums in school that were inappropriate, sex eds and stuff like that. So even in the 90s, they were sort of the backlash to what would you call liberalism, or these things creeping into our culture. So I kind of always grew up with that in my family. They're also very creative, very artistic. So divergent types of personality.
A mixed bag, huh?
Yeah. And so I was homeschooled, so I was allowed to pretty much pursue whatever I was interested in. I did have some kind of mail-in curriculum. At first it was VHS tapes, and then it was just workbooks. But very soon I just kind of didn't do any of that, and I would just ride my bike to the library and check out all the books and just devour books on things that I was interested in. So I was very autodidactic in that way, like self-taught music and art and...
And what were some of the things that young Jamie was interested in?
Very much music and singing. So I was, if I could have been anything, I would have been like a pop star, like a Mariah Carey.
Well, that goes hand in hand then with some of your research, right?
Exactly, yeah. So that's why I have a soft spot for those girls. I went to, when I was done with homeschooling, I went to a place where you could test out and get like a diploma for gifted kids.
Oh.
Not that I was ever deemed that way, but I just heard of this place where, oh, you can take this test and get a diploma. So I did that, and I was 16. And I started going to college at 16, a community college where you could, you were legally allowed to take classes if you had, certain criterias, the diploma and the transportation and stuff. So I started going to college at 16 years old. And I really enjoyed community college because it was kind of a mix of people. You had older people, you had younger people, you had like people who are trying to restart their life. And so it was just kind of a fun environment, not as much pressure as a university.
Right.
And also where I could continue to just study things that I was interested in.
Yeah, explore your own interests.
Yeah. So I did that for about 4 years. I didn't get any type of degree because I didn't follow any kind of like lesson plan.
Right.
But I took a lot of music classes. I took a lot of art, acting, public speaking, like creative arts type things. And then let's see. So all of this time I was pretty much involved in church. I sang in the choir. I did all of the church band. When we switched to a more like progressive church, I was in the band, like playing the keyboards.
Okay. You're in the electric keyboard? Somebody else is on the electric drum set?
Oh, yeah. My partner was the song leader and the guitarist, and my dad was in the band, so it was a fun time. And then I just kind of got deeper into the conspiracy aspect in a way that not a lot of people were going to follow me, because this was maybe in like 2004, let's say.
Okay, so this is early after 9/11. That was probably a catalyst to maybe question a few things.
Oh, yeah. So I was only like 20 or so when I saw that. But when I saw that, I was like, there's no way. Even the official story to a teen, like someone who's very young, I'm like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Right? And everyone around me is like, how can you say that? This, and there was no 9/11 truth. There was no documentaries yet when it just happened. But I had that on my mind. I was just like, whatever they're telling us, this is not true. Because when I was younger, my mom used to rent these videos like about the Clinton family.
Oh.
Like how, they unalive people.
Yes. There seems to be a bit of a weird phenomenon that surrounds that family.
Right. So these were early, or like in the 90s, or like FEMA camps. So people would get their camcorders out and like get footage of FEMA camps, and then we would watch that and like, what is this for? And why are they building all of these facilities for like massive lockdowns?
Right.
And then that happened, and then I saw that movie Loose Change like a couple years after 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that one?
Yep.
And then I saw that movie Zeitgeist, and that really put me in a kind of a tailspin, because that has 3 parts. Do you remember that classic, right? Zeitgeist.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. And at that time, the Zeitgeist part, I was already aware of the Federal Reserve, but it really like sort of emphasized my astrotheology at the time. So I was that guy that was like, dude, Jesus, don't you know Christianity is a solar religion? They worship on Sunday, all that stuff. Basically everything that documentary says.
Yeah, so I bought that hook, line, and sinker because I was searching. I was always like trying to learn more, because I guess one of my core beliefs as a child or something is like, if you're smart enough, you don't have to suffer. Like, you can think your way out of any type of bad thing that would happen to you if you just have enough knowledge.
Right.
Right. So I'm like, I can make my life really easy by being smart and reading lots of books and being educated. And, then you get deeper into things like the Zeitgeist, and you're like, well, this must be it, because the church that I'm going to now, it doesn't really feed me spiritually.
Right.
It was just like a pop-up, non-denominational rock band worship, praise and worship kind of church.
Right.
And So there's no mysticism in that. There's no like food in that environment. And especially for me, who was also like trying to introduce early conspiracy theories to friends and family. I mean, come on. They didn't want to, they're not having it. They don't want to talk about chemtrails.
Yeah.
Right? No one wants to know about Federal Reserve or taxes or terrorists or not, or Bush or, like what else was going on?
Well, the wars.
Enron.
Opiate crisis. Yeah. Enron,
Military industrial complex, like just all of these things that are right under the surface that nobody like gets to that level back then.
Right.
Now it's a different world.
It is. Yeah, it is a different world.
But there was no YouTube. There was no one to back me up. There was like a couple documentaries on the web. They're like, where did you learn that? On the internet?
Yeah.
Right? Because the internet wasn't a trusted source or anything back then in the early 2000s. So it was like the Wild West. So I read a book by David Icke, and that put me in a deeper level of understanding. And then so I was like coming away from Christianity and going towards like just the amorphous love and light, brother, right?
Yep.
Like
that was me at one point. That was me too.
Yeah, I was reading this book the other day, and then the back of it had a advertisement for this little thing called Handbook for the New Paradigm. Have you ever heard of that?
No, I haven't.
Oh, that was going around everywhere back in the day, like in 2005 in Austin, maybe 2007-ish. But it was just this little book that's supposed to like change the world or whatever. But everyone was talking about Handbook for the New Paradigm. They're talking about infinite love and David Icke and like the Matrix. And so I found myself, I was very lonely in my situation in California because I didn't have anybody to talk to about this stuff. And I thought if I went to Austin, Texas, that was like the capital of conspiracy theorists, because Alex Jones was there and some others. And so I had a brother who lived in Dallas, and I went to stay with him while I like transitioned from California to Austin in 2007, which was a really fun like place to be. It was on the cutting edge of like what's cool and what's hip and the conspiracy world and everything going on there. So I did that for a long time. I was a-religious. I wasn't like, I was just thinking that you could take from all of the religions and make something great.
Right.
Is that called perennialism or something?
Yeah, basically,
Yeah.
It's the smorgasbord of religion and spirituality, right?
Yeah. And so I would do yoga, and I never got serious about meditating, but I did find that yoga really helped balance your moods and your physical body and just like calm. I loved the calmness and peace of the Eastern ways of thinking, Zen and stuff like that, because I'm just like and it
was probably the mystical too that you're reaching out, coming from that sort of Baptist background. You're talking about the sort of loss of Christianity, and with Eastern mysticism, you can be this weird sort of spiritual, not religious, but yet then also have access to mystical experiences at the exact same time. And so it's so appealing. I mean, that was really me throughout the majority of my 20s.
Yeah. And I also liked the vibrant colors.
Yes.
I wasn't used to that. The aesthetics of like Hinduism, I really loved. And so if you look behind you, in Orthodoxy now, that we have that things to, I don't want to say trip out on, but it's like that. You meditate on them.
Yes. And you have that sensual pleasure, that aesthetic pleasure. That I won't lie. When I was a non-Christian, I've always said this, the first Orthodox church I went to was Holy Virgin Cathedral there in San Francisco with St. John of Shanghai. And at the time I was dating a Ukrainian girl, and she really wasn't Christian, but she wanted to just go in and burn some candles. So I would go in there with her for the first time. And the beauty of the icons was like awe-inspiring. Now, again, I wasn't a Christian. I was very into psychedelics and perennialism, this basic worldview that we're talking about. But the aesthetics and the orderedness, and then seeing the biblical stories, and because I grew up Methodist, I could still look at the iconography and know what was being displayed, and it was like, wow, that is phenomenal. And so it's not like I'm Orthodox because we have icons and the aesthetics, but it's certainly an aspect when you go back to a sort of austere Protestant form of worship, and there's like nothing on the walls, and it's just everything's white, and there's like one cross, and it's like, well, where's like the aesthetics? Where's the beauty?
Mm-hmm. And so for an artistic person like I really liked the mandalas, and I like
the
Eastern
yantras.
religion. Yeah. What was I going to say about?
Colors, aesthetics, Eastern mysticism. You were for somebody who's artistic.
Yeah, and so like the type of people that I was hanging around were very free-spirited hippies, different all types of people, and we found ourselves living in Kansas in one point, and we were the type of people that we would let people stay with us if they didn't have a place to go.
Oh, okay.
So our house was the house for, couch surfers and ne'er-do-wells and just nice people that but they just, couldn't get it together. And I had several people like on my couch, on my floor, in the spare room, everywhere. And I was like, kind of like, you're swamping the boat here, guys. And these Christians came to my door, and they wanted to invite me to church, and I was like, okay, because I was always kind of like trying to get these guys to like do something.
Right.
Yeah. Like, if you're going to stay, you're going to get on food stamps, and you're going to try and like improve your situation. And I'm like, maybe we could all go to church. Because I remembered that from my youth. Like, there's stable people in the world that, have families, and they can support themselves. They have jobs. They're called Christians. And so they came to my door, and they're like, would you come to our church? I'm like, yeah, I'll bring all these guys to church. And I said, do you have like a food pantry or anything that they could pick from? And like, oh, no. And I'm like, okay, well, do you have any programs where like you can help them find jobs, or like counseling for a job? Just, do you have anything valuable that's practical from your organization? And like, no, not really, nothing like that. It's like, well, what are you even doing? Like, I'm a better Christian than, and that's what I'm thinking in my head at that time. Like, I'm doing the Lord's work.
Yeah. At least you're trying to bring people to Christ.
I'm trying to just feed them and give them a place to, like, a roof over their head. And they're like, well, there's nothing we can really do, but you can come. And I'm like, I'm not coming there. I already, like, have the principles of loving your neighbor, so I don't need to, like, go to church. So that was one instance that just kind of kept me. And then, the people that I was around and living with, every time I tried to get them to, like, look at a church, they hated it. And I can't blame them. Because, when you walk in and it's just like all like elderly people, no offense, I love old people, but like the entire church is like white-haired people that
I agree. There's you got to find people you can relate to, right?
Yeah. So these hippies are not going to church. And so this is just kind of like my path that you asked for, like coming from church and then out of it, being drawn out of it by false information and like conspiracies couched in truth, but then at the heart of it, it's another lie like zeitgeist.
Right.
Because when you actually go and look at the sources that he is coming up with are bunk and stupid, and Jesus is not Zeus, and he's not Horus, and he's December 25th is not what he says it is. And so it's very easily debunked now. But back then I was like, well, if I've been lied to about like patriotism, and if I've been lied to about like what America is and what taxes are and blah, 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 then this is probably a lie too.
Right.
And
that's a perfect bridge into then the topic and the research, because it's about establishing these sort of like plausible narratives. Because just like the zeitgeist, like you said, as I matured in my own spirituality and like began to investigate some of the claims that I'd always make, like again the relationship between Osiris and Horus and Mithra and Christ and solar religions, and then you do kind of look into it and you're like, oh yeah, Mithras has like this connection and this connection, but then all these don't work. Yeah, these don't work. But then okay, Osiris has this connection, this, but none of these work. So then you find, oh well, shoot, that's not. They don't just match on one to one. Like these things are way more complicated. But it's the plausibility of the narrative. And in the same way, that's exactly what then Hollywood is all about. And so now combined into your journey, like now you're getting into conspiracy theories, been sort of on that journey, it sounded like, for a few years. What brought your interest then looking back at like Hollywood and then connecting it with some of these ancient pagan rituals and formations?
So first, maybe in like 2006, I started watching Alex Jones and all sorts of first or second wave conspiracy guys like Jordan Maxwell.
Oh my gosh, I was big into Jordan Maxwell and Michael Tsarian.
Yeah. I listened to him too. He had a course that was $500. Do you remember that?
I do.
Yeah, I couldn't afford that,
I
watched all his videos.
I did too, because he had a bunch of free stuff. I would take notes, like at that time.
Yeah.
And I remember, it's kind of embarrassing now, but I was watching the Jordan Maxwell stuff, and I was blown away. I had both feet into Terrence McKenna, Alan Watts, that whole thing, psychedelics, and then I'm coming across the Jordan Maxwell stuff and all the wordplay. I bring that up to one of the scholars of religion, and I started going on one that hit like Jordan Maxwell's like wordplay, and this connects to that, and that connects to this, and this connects to that. Mm-hmm. And they just like look at me like, no, it doesn't. That's not what that means. And like that only works in English. And then they showed me like all the like the other language. Like, what are you talking about? Like, who told you this? And then I was like, well, maybe English. And then in my mind, well, English is just a magical language, and this is like the web. This is what they're casting the spells with, and you sort of like try to rationalize this whole bubble where the conspiracy is sort of almost so large. Like if Jordan Maxwell is right, it's like everything is part of this massive, massive conspiracy to like entrap the human mind. And it's not tied to necessarily morality, which is now I'm sure both of us, when we look back and look at the conspiracies and look at the state of the world, it's totally a spiritual worldview, it's spiritual battle, and it's about morality. But sorry, I didn't mean to rant there. But the Jordan Maxwell, huge part of my journey too. I dove head first into all that stuff.
Yeah, I remember Michael Tsarian. I watched all his like tarot DVD series, and I really wanted to meet him. And it's funny. Well, I emailed him because he was saying this stuff about there's giant bone. This is so goofy. He said there's giant bones hidden in different places in the world, and those are places that are always like protected from natural disasters and stuff like that. I was like, where are these giant bones? So I like emailed him, and this was way back in the day before like anybody blew up famous. So he actually responded to me, and you know, I said, where are the bones? And he's like, I'm not going to tell you that. Oh, what the heck? Okay, fine. And then I met him in England one time, and I was like hanging out with a group that was just listening to him talk, because that's kind of how it's funny that these guys, when they go to a conference, they're finally validated in a world. So they like get all of that, you know, celebrity energy. So he's just talking, and all of these people are in a semicircle around listening to him. And I was there too. And then, you know, when it was my turn to like meet him or, you know, introduce myself, I started talking to him about all of this. I was talking about Disney, something Disney, and like a stream of consciousness of my discoveries that I had made. And he was like, wow. He was all impressed. And he was like, can you email me all of this information? And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that, because he went to tell me what lion bones are. Yeah. I'm going to keep my information to myself, and I'll write a book of my own.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
So what we've come to the conclusion is that in spite of Michael Tsarian, that's why you wrote your research.
I wrote that to spite a lot of people, because back then, if you didn't have a book, you were nobody. Like, nobody knew what a podcast was. There was no YouTube yet. It was just
Right.
Google Video.
Right.
So what you would do is go to an Access studio in Austin and make a Wayne's World TV show about conspiracy. And then upload them to Google Video, and then maybe a year later, YouTube started. But you couldn't get any respect if you weren't published back then.
Right.
I was like, I gotta have a book. And I saw this magazine that was like a Time magazine. It was a special edition about the Freemasons, and it had a big compass and square on it. And I open it up, and I'm looking through this thing, and it's poorly written. There's nothing interesting in there. It's all giant blown up pictures. The thing cost $15 for a magazine.
Jeez.
Yeah, because it was like a special,
Still, that was back
collector
in the day. That's not Biden inflation numbers.
No, and I'm like, man, I've been to all these Mason temples. I've been to all these secret esoteric sites. I've read all of these books. Like,
right.
I could do my own, and it'll look like this, and it'll be even better. And that's how this book was born.
Oh, and that's the one. If you want give people the skinny on, you don't sell that one anymore, correct?
I don't sell this one anymore because this was still when I was like under the impression that magic was neutral.
Mm-hmm.
And it just depended on the user.
Right. Yeah, and that's a popular. I believed in the exact same thing, that there's white magic, gray magic, black magic, and this has to do with the intentionality of the magician. And so if you're using magic to help others, well, then that's white magic. If it's gray magic and it's a little mixture of your own will and others' will, and then black will is just the full-on like manifestation of your own will.
Mm-hmm. So I put this book together, and I did this cover, like it's part my drawings and part pictures of places that I've been, but I wanted to start with the children because I noticed that that's where they get you is from childhood. So you've got two little kids here watching Disney Donald Duck. I don't know if you've ever seen this cartoon. It's called Education for Death.
Education for Death?
So it was a part of Disney's propaganda campaign in the World War II era. And if you Google like Disney on the front lines, there a whole bunch of videos will come up about propaganda, about paying taxes, about like the creation of a Nazi, kind of weird non-Disney-ish stuff, because they also did training videos for the army. So, and then you've got this like robot who's made of like an iPhone and iPad who's like enchanting the kids. It's a whole thing. Like there's an exegesis about my art on the covers of these books.
I love it.
And you've got like this sorcerer that looks like the Pope.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. It gives a real like Cardinal Vatican vibe.
It was the Ratzinger Pope back then.
Oh, okay.
Remember him?
Yeah.
So I'm like, I want this black sorcerer to look like, the Pope or whatever. And you've got like black magic on one side and then nature on the other. And then this actually is from that church in New York City called St. John of the Divine.
I'm not familiar with it. Is there something particular about this church?
Yeah, it's got so much weird. I can't remember what kind of church it is. It's like it's an ecumenical, not Lutheran.
Cathedral of St. John the Divine, New York City.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
What kind of church is that?
It's it looks like Gothic style Episcopal church.
That's it. So one thing about that church, if you go there, it has these like columns that have prophetic things on them, and one of them was like there's like a twin towers with smoke coming out of it, and all these weird things in the columns. So this Episcopal, he just yelled it to me. So this one, I put a lot of like Magic 101 in it, right? The pentagram and Mephistopheles and Manly Hall. Do you remember that story? Because I wanted people to recognize pop culture for what it was, which is like a ritual working.
Right.
a magical spell. Nowadays, you would call it mass formation psychosis.
Yes. Well, let's just get into it because that was one of the things that I wanted to talk about. So maybe even before we get into the specifics of all the Babylonian and the current Hollywood stuff, ritual is what unifies the past and the present. And so ritual, generally speaking, just as a category, as a religious studies scholar, is the development of sacred time, sacred space. So within rituals, rituals are technically not belonging within traditional space and time. And that's then it's like these ritualistic practices, whether it be the ancient Babylonian or rituals to Iana or then current rituals to Beyonce or Katy Perry, whatever. Speak a little bit to the ritualism, the importance of ritual and how ritual ties everything we're going to dive into. It ties everything together.
Mm-hmm. What some occultists would call it would be self-transformative psychodrama. So in the occult, if I gave this example in Florida, but they say if you want to be something, then just act like the thing. So if you decide I want to be a vampire, then start drinking blood, don't go out in the daytime, sleep in a coffin, wear black, don't eat garlic, do all the things classically that a vampire would. And over time, if you do this enough and make it ritual and habitual, then you will be a vampire.
Right, right.
And you can apply this to anything. You can apply this to being a magician or a god or an animal, whatever. But it's that thing that takes us, like you said, out of the here and now and the normal space and time and puts you in a different realm. And what they have you do in a magic ritual is, like, let's say you want to invoke the god of war or Mars or something. So you want to get all red. You have your candles red. You want to have the symbols of Mars. You want to have the smells of Mars. You want to have the proper incense. So all of your five senses have to be attuned to this thing that you're trying to invoke or evoke. And liturgy is a little bit like that because we say that it's outside space and time. Yeah. We're linking up with the worship in heaven that's happening at the same time. We're also out of space and time, and we are participating in the crucifixion, mystical ideas like that. Right. But this can be applied in a wrong way.
Right.
Magical rituals, invoking spirits or evoking them.
Right.
Right. So I wanted to talk about art and how that is used in magic. So I talk about cave paintings in France and how setting an intention is sort of a magical act. Like you paint on the wall that you are going to hunt some deers or something, and then you go out and hunt the deer. So that's a primitive idea of magic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right?
And it's tied to even sigil magic, the idea that we can... So sigil is the idea that we look at the symbols we create and sort of can remanifest that reality through a sort of symbolic magical process. And so a lot of people who believe in sigil magic will point again to the cave paintings in France or whatnot and say, look, what the shamans do is they sort of linguistically lay out the scenario that they want to have at play. They draw it on the cave wall, and then they go participate in the hunt to sort of manifest this thing to happen, where people think, oh, maybe they're just depicting, and now the general consensus among scholars is, no, they're describing what they want. It's an intentional process.
And it's all about your will. So when you study magic, you're going to come across the true will, the divine will, the will of your higher self, your guardian angel will.
Yep, cosmic will, somehow we can know that too.
So it's this idea of bending nature and the forces of nature, space and time, things like that, to your own ideas and what you want, your will. And then so in this book, I was talking about a sorcerer. I was trying to differentiate between a sorcerer and a magician, which in the occult world, there is definitely a demarcation there. But so the sorcerer wants to impose his will on everyone else.
Right.
A magician will use his will, but like if he feels like a resistance, or if he feels bad, or if he feels like he's stepping on other person's will, maybe he'll back off a little bit. But a sorcerer's like going for it, right? Like even to the point of mind control, like physical control of your body.
Right.
So that's kind of what the first chapter of this rare book is about, the one that you don't have.
Right.
And I was also in a lot of like Esther Hicks.
Oh my gosh, yes. I did one on spirit manifestation. Her and Bashar. Do you remember the guy who would be Bashar? He'd be possessed by the alien, and then he'd like sit there like this and
yeah. I know people who would go to see him and like sit in the circle all cross-legged and wait for hours for Bashar to arrive in his body. So I was listening to Esther Hicks and The Secret and quantum physics and all of this like half goofy stuff, which now we make fun of. Like we call it the zone theory after this Tim and Eric skit. Do you know those comedians?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so look up Tim and Eric zone theory and you will get The Secret like roasted, because it is so funny. They're like, you can be rich and famous now, and just giving you all of these crazy promises. If you just have gratitude and if you just live with light and love in your heart, everything will work out.
Oh,
and,
I see it now, yeah. I'll check that out afterwards.
Yeah. Just you gotta like hook up with divine consciousness, man. And
yeah.
all of these goofy ways of thinking. So, but there's truth in here, because I was also talking about like how emotions play a big part in manifesting things in physical reality.
Right.
Because these are real science, quantifiable things, vibrations.
Yes.
So I have stuff about imagination and magic and like, do you remember the cymatics?
Oh yes, I've done videos on cymatics and logos. Yeah, absolutely.
All magic, I said, seems to be a result of associations or changes in consciousness powered by emotions. So this is what the sorcerers, what I was trying to say of like Babylon or Egypt, they're trying to manipulate you using emotional techniques.
Yes,
right?
and that has to do with the energy of emotion is fuel for the theurgic process. And a lot of these ain't. So when we look at Babylon here, they're anthropomorphizing human emotions and natural processes. That's part of what these ancient pagan traditions were doing. And so when they venerate maybe the sexual energy as a goddess or whatever, well then inflaming sexual energy is part of a process that unifies society and is part of a ritualistic phenomenon. And that's where I think it's tied. Even Orthodoxy, like the other forms of Christianity, because they don't have this understanding of energies, it's like they can't like bring answers to these problems that we're talking about regarding these energies. Because I think when we look at Hollywood, and like you talked about the eternal goddess, how they use Katy Perry or Beyonce or Britney Spears, they're just different emanations of the sort of eternal goddess figure. And they're inflaming our sort of sexual lust. And so we're made in the image of God. We have divine energies as long as we participate with God, and we can lose that image of God when we sin. But by inflaming the sexual passions, they're using our creative energies to basically move society and create things that move us towards this sort of ultimate demonic will.
Exactly. And that's a secret of Freemasonry and stuff like that not a lot of people talk about, like their aprons and their the white apron that they wear over their waist and everything, and the G for the general principle. Some people will argue that the compass and square is actually like two pairs of legs and stuff like, and the G is whatever.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, you're exactly right. So they manipulate us using our sexuality. And so when you study magic, you're going to go down the path where you find out that a ritual is 10 times or 100 times more powerful if you add sex in it.
Yes. And sex, right? Yeah, and that's really this process. And even when you look at the occultism, historically speaking, you look at all these different, you look at like occult processes, or if you look in Eastern mysticism, look up tantric processes. and you're going to find then sexual rituals, and it's going to be tied to also the manifestation of your will, and that you can have an intention, engage in sex, and it's all about then the orgasm itself is using that orgasmic energy, that sort of sexual fecundity, to then manifest your own desire. And that's what they're trying to hijack, and they see these as spiritual energies.
And it's also a type of child, so it's like, you know, the mystery of childbirth.
It's like the homunculus, right? It's like the magician creating like the little baby thing, like the little hominid thing.
So it's harnessing the power of creation, where you're supposed to be creating another man in the image of God, but you're using it to get wealth or summon demons or whatever you're going to be doing.
And it's always a Frankenstein, right? It always ends up a Frankenstein.
So talk a lot about quantum physics, because that was big back then, like the 2010s.
Non-locality consciousness.
Yeah. Let's see. I don't know why I put the banishing ritual of the pentagram in this book, because I was thinking, you know, a lot of this stuff is really beautiful and aesthetically pleasing, and if I use it the right way, I never did like sex magic or anything like that. I'm just a nerd. I'm just a reader in my head, because I also was bringing in knowledge of conspiracies,
right,
and knowledge that this stuff can be used to hurt people, like Kabbalah.
Right.
You know, you can use that in mind control very easily. Like Fritz Springmeier talks about using the tree of life to place different personality alters, and they use these as frameworks for a system of personalities in a person.
Right.
So I'm like, if pedos and gross people are using this magic, I don't want to like mess with it. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Like I've never done a spell. I've never done like an incantation. But I know all of this stuff just by reading and watching pop culture.
Yeah.